It's time now for the Success is Subjective podcast. Here is your host and therapeutic consultant for young adults only, Joanna Lilley.
Hi, and welcome to the show. If you're new here, I'm glad to have you. This podcast was formed to collectively build a bank of stories from normal people sharing their nonlinear paths. Unfortunately, social media paints a narrow picture of what success looks like, so I'm doing my best to spread the news that changing course is common and you don't have to know what you want to do the rest of your life at 18. If you're a parent worried about your young adult and whether their path is leading them to success, you're in the right place. I'm a therapeutic consultant who works with young adults to connect them with resources that'll help them get back on a better path. So if you're curious, let's chat. You can schedule a free consultation through my website, which you can find the link for in the show notes. Today, my guest is Kathy Nauta. Kathy is a therapeutic and educational consultant in the New York City area. She's a professional member of IECA and a chair of the IECA Therapeutic Committee. She brings her personal and professional experience and passion to all of her clients to get them on the path to achieving their full potential. I've traveled to visit programs both stateside and internationally with Kathy, and so I respect her, and I am grateful that she took the time to be a guest on today's podcast. Let's not wait any longer. Here's Kathy. All right, Kathy, welcome to being a guest on the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me.
I'm excited. We're going to jump right in. I was mentioning in the intro, which was recorded separately, that you and I have done some tours together. And I enjoy my time with you. So I'm excited for this conversation. But for the sake of literally just jumping right in and asking the typical questions, why don't you tell the listeners, where were you growing up and what was the message that you were receiving about what you were supposed to do after 18?
Yes. So I grew up in northern New Jersey, a little town called Stockholm. It's about an hour west of Manhattan. I would say I was just going to college. I think because my dad and his whole family, none of them went to college. My mom and her sisters went to college, but it was definitely a big thing. That's what you did. And there was really no other looking at it. Like, gap year, I never even ever heard that term. Mm-hmm. That was never terminology used when I grew up.
So where did you go? What did you do?
So I went to Villanova University and right outside of Philadelphia, and I studied accounting because my only goal, because I grew up in a small town, so my goal was to make a lot of money. And I wanted to live in New York City. And the only way I could afford to live in New York City was to make the most money out of college, which was accounting or engineering.
And I'm doing my best to stifle thinking about you as an accountant.
Yeah.
Knowing you now and like knowing who you are and like what it is that you're doing. It's hard.
Not a good choice. It's not a good choice. I'm good with numbers. And oh my gosh, it was so hard for me. Accounting was so hard. And I always felt stupid. Mm. I always was waiting for the professor to tell me I should try something else. You know, my professor was like the dean of the business school, and I could just see him like, oh my God, lady. Yeah. And then I did, I got 1 million jobs, December of my senior year, 4 big 6 accounting firms. No, 5 out of 6. I got 5 out of 6 offers.
Wow.
December of my senior year. I'm great at interviewing and I had great grades. And I picked Coopers and Lybrand and did my 2-year stint doing boring auditing and living in the city. And then I took my CPA exam and passed it.
Oh my gosh. I picture this situation where you're like, you are getting further and further like down the rabbit hole of like, this is not fun. This is like really hard work. Literally, work is hard. Other than some of the things that you said, like, oh, I interviewed really well, but like, you know.
I think I thought I was stupid. Mm. You know, I always saw myself as a very smart person. Everyone told me I was a very smart person. which is never helpful. And I think growing up, my dad especially worked very, very hard. So we were definitely lower to middle or lower class family. So he worked a full-time job and a part-time job. So he worked in a furniture warehouse, loading and unloading furniture from trucks. And then at night and weekends, he would pump gas. So I think I didn't see anyone in my family working for the joy of it.
Okay. So that's really what continued to, like, having that childhood perspective just kind of carried over for your own work environment where you're literally working to live, right? The job sucks, but I'm like going through the motion because it provides me the opportunity to do the things like live in the city, which is what you wanted to do.
And it was all about the money because I didn't have money growing up. So if you have to be miserable, but you have money, I was all right with that.
Okay. Well, at least you're honest.
Yeah.
Okay. So clearly something happened because you're not doing that anymore. So talk us through kind of what were the next chapters in your professional and personal life that led you to where you are now.
Okay. So then I continued. I worked 4 more years in the city as financial reporting, something just as boring as the first thing. Worked for a public company. And then I was pregnant and my husband got a job transfer to Boston. So we lived up in Massachusetts for 4 years. I had 2 of my kids. I didn't work because he was never home. So raised my kids in Massachusetts. He was transferred back to New York. So we moved back to New Jersey, kind of where we both grew up. And we've been here now 23 years. And so for a long time, I was home with the kids. And just one of my members of my family just needed extra attention. So it was just difficult for me to go back to work.
Okay. So now you've got you're like bouncing all over the place. I'm just thinking about, raising kids. That is more than a full-time job. Can we just say that? Like, please, for folks, that is absolutely work in itself. But you didn't go back to being a CPA. That's what I just heard you say.
So I always wanted to work and I couldn't work. So I tried to find a lot of part-time jobs. So one of my friends was a real estate agent. So I got my real estate license and worked for her team because I could do it whenever, like home and weekends, like putting all the listings on the MLS, open houses. So there's a lot it was very flexible. So I did that. I did do books for a restaurant. We had friends that owned a restaurant. So I did that. And then I started getting into more of what I am today. So my first job in this area, I worked for the New Jersey Children's System of Care as a parent advocate. So working mostly with lower income families, but not all, giving parents the resources like how to ask questions at a doctor's appointment, an IEP meeting, resources for support groups. And then some were very low income. So where do you find cheaper food? Where can you get oil on credit? Where can you...
Wow.
All of those things. So I did that for a couple of years. You go out to people's homes and some of those situations actually were a little scary.
Yeah, I can only imagine. But you're also just really painting the picture of like, okay, you're still doing a lot, right? Like from the moment you got married and then obviously with like being pregnant and transferring up to Boston and then returning back to the New York City area, you're still doing things. And it sounds like, honestly, it's kind of like a reflection back to, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong too. I know we kind of talked about this. You never really saw a family member that it was enjoying their job, right? Like we're doing the work because this is what needs to be done. But yet I imagine that at some point in some of these jobs that you had, right? Like doing the books for your friend's restaurant or, getting your real estate license and kind of doing, dabbling in that space and then being a parent advocate, at some point, maybe some of that felt different for you. I'm kind of going out on a limb, Kathy. What do you think? Were these jobs feeling like jobs or was it leading you down a path where it got you to a position where you liked?
Yeah, the parent advocate was definitely leading me towards that path that I really wanted to, because of my personal experiences, work with families. And I realized how important that was for me. So after becoming a parent advocate for 2 years, then I did, and before that I did the NAMI basics training. So that they do for parents.
Yeah.
And then I taught that training a couple times to parents. And then I was just constantly educating myself. Then I did COPA, Council of Parents, Advocates, and Attorneys. I did their SEAT training to be a special education advocate, interned with a special education attorney, and then worked at that for a little bit. But because of my personal experience, that was very triggering for me. It was very hard to work with school districts. And then I ended up in educational consulting because of personal experiences that I had.
Well, and now you own your own consulting practice. So, just for like the quick plug, and folks that are listening, parents included, who do you work with?
Yeah, so I work with children, adolescents, and young adults that are not reaching their full potential and helping. It could be anything. It could be a school placement. It could be wraparound services. It could be a crisis. It could be someone with learning disabilities. So getting to know the family, doing my research, and coming up with short and long-term planning and partnering with the family and their team to get their child moving in the right direction.
And we'll make sure that we have the links to your business in the show notes for anybody that's interested in connecting with you personally and or professionally. And so I'm going to ask this question because I ask everybody. Mm-hmm. Now that we know your journey, I totally have to just, inquire. Do you see yourself as successful?
I definitely do. And it has taken such a different, it's just like if I could tell my younger self what I know now. It's just a different look. Are you happy? Are you healthy? Do you have important relationships with your family and your friends? Are you doing meaningful work? And do you get to do the fun things that you want to do, whatever that is? Is there time for work and is there time for play? I know it's very broad, but if you asked the 18-year-old me, I would have said, I want an apartment in New York City, apartment in Paris, a Porsche, and I'd be a CEO. I mean, literally, that's probably what I would have said. Now, if I didn't have children, all of those things may still have been possible. That didn't happen. Yes, I have 3 kids, and yes, I would definitely say I was successful. I think. Well, I'll leave it at that, and I'll let you ask your next question.
Well, I'm just kind of curious, right? You're talking about, actually, I'm reflecting back on your earlier comment too, where conversation was, you're going to college, right? Like the idea or conversation of gap year was just like, that was a non-existent discussion, or just like an unknown entity in itself. And so now that you are a parent and your children are grown, I'm kind of curious from your perspective if you saw a shift either in the community in which your kids were raised, or if you yourself as a parent ended up kind of just parenting differently in terms of what came after high school. If there's you feel like there's a question in there. I got distracted because I thought I had a tick on my arm and I kind of panicked. I was like freaking out, like, oh my God, is that a tick? Okay.
So I would say none of my children wanted to do gap years. I did ask them all if they would do a gap year. My daughter wanted to go right to college. My son wanted to play baseball in college, so he did not want to do that extra year. And my youngest didn't either. I would say in our area, a lot of people do it for sports, right? They take that PG year and to get bigger for sports. I think how I've changed it is try to make sure my kids had a lot of different experiences since they didn't do that. So, for example, just we do a lot of camping or travel or go to New York City, take them to a play. So trying to do different things. And I love to travel. So I created this tradition with my kids when they graduate college, I take them on a trip. So my daughter and I went to France. We went to Italy with my son. And I still have one more in college. He's talking about Japan or Thailand. So we'll see. I know.
Okay.
I know. He's a big spender. I know. so, so
Yeah, it's like such a gift if you're saying on the front end you're not interested in exploring, gap year doesn't have to be international. And I think that still ends up being kind of the automatic vision when people are talking about it, but it can be stateside or whatever. But you're giving them a cultural experience, prior to them launching into some sort of probably rigorous work or, independent, post college next chapter for them, which is, and it's also, it sounds like, I imagine it's probably like just a good bonding experience between you and each of your kid. Yeah.
It's so great. And I think, what I would want people to know that I look back now is like, even, I don't even want to tell you how old I was. I'm probably still figuring it out, but I took life way too seriously and was a goal setter, measured my worth by my productivity. And, I probably had learning disabilities of some variety that I just remember I had to study so much harder and longer than everybody else. So I think that made things very difficult for me. But I wish I just had this general sense of things were going to work out and let it unfold. And even if it's not the goals you set, those new goals could be just as good or better, and sort of let life flow for you. And I tried to control it too much.
I'm also thinking too that maybe that also translates to the approach that you take or the conversations that you have with client parents too, right? Like if you see them taking their child seriously and or are focused on kind of some of these markers that might be a little bit, maybe adding to some of the stress, dare I say, there's probably some sort of like weaving in the greater conversation of like, here's why it's okay for things to just kind of like let them play out rather than trying to set the expectations or goals that might be a little bit misaligned with what's showing up for, what's necessary for that young person.
Definitely. I just had that conversation yesterday talking to a referral and saying, I'm pretty transparent and just like to get it out on the table, my philosophy and how I work. And, parents worry about when their kids are struggling and missing education, right? Sometimes have to take a couple month break or year from school. And setting the stage, like my philosophy is the importance of the well-being of your child, socially and emotionally. I get the academics, right? It's obvious from what you're telling me, your child is very bright. And when they're in the right frame of mind, they're just going to go right through it. I was telling them, I'm like, I just had a client who did a year and a half of school in 8 months. Kids, when they're feeling good, they can do it. So do not worry about 2, 3, 6 months of missed school. Emotional and social well-being is the utmost priority.
Okay, I'm going to ask one more question. This might feel like it's a little off script, but hopefully not. I feel like really in the last couple minutes, you have shared some like really insightful comments or just like mantras almost that could be reflective and also really helpful for families that are listening. If there was another parent, and bear with me because I think let's hone in. A lot of folks that are listening to this are parents of this like transition age youth. So it really is like the high school senior or like early into college, gap year, like emerging adult, like small bracket. Mm-hmm. If you can give any additional advice beyond what you have already shared, is there something that comes to mind that feels important for you to relay?
I would say it's very important to take the time to get to know yourself. When I heard that I'm sure I heard that at some point when I was high school or college age, and you have no idea what that means and how you would go about doing that. And I think it's a combination of saying yes to all that good stuff, new friends, new experiences, whatever job, whatever vacation, like just yes to everything. The more you do, the more you get out, the more you learn about yourself. and listen to those people that are close to you that are trying to tell you things that you maybe don't want to hear, and get curious and ask. I think sometimes we ignore that, and it is difficult for people to try to tell you, but it's just it's so important to learn about yourself. And it's hard in general for everybody, and it's so hard now because, like, did you ever see, I'm going off script, that it was like this comic, and he talks, because everybody talks about mindfulness now, right? And he's like, and he's my generation growing up in the 70s and 80s. He's like, we were always mindful because there was nothing else to do, right? You're on the bus, you're mindful. There's no phone. You're sitting in class, like your whole freaking life is mindfulness. You have nothing but to do but think and be bored and figure out what to do with that boredom. Where now you're like, we are all overstimulated, sensory stimulation. And there's no time about thinking who you are. You're thinking about what you're lacking from everything you're seeing on social media, right? I'm not rich enough, pretty enough, good enough, smart enough, popular enough, whatever it is the poor kids are thinking. So that's what I would say, and forget about what people think about you. Yes, you want to be respectful to people. Yes, you want to be kind. I'm not saying to be rude to people, but be you, be happy you're you. If you're being a kind and polite you, go experience, say yes, meet all kinds of people. That's what I would say. Say yes to life.
I love that. Kathy, thank you for taking that little off the beaten path final question with me, because I know that was on the fringe of what I typically ask guests, especially at the end. And I just figured, as a consultant, you probably had some wisdom that kind of overlaps with the clients that you're seeing, the parents of the clients, and your own kind of personal. So the flair being personal and professional overlap in how you wanted to respond to that. So thank you for doing that with me. Thank you for being you. Thank you for the work that you're doing. And thank you again for carving out time to be a guest on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Joanna. Always great seeing you.
That's it for this week's Success is Subjective episode. We want to thank our guest for joining Joanna on the show this week and for being willing to share your journey. This podcast would not exist if it weren't for people such as yourself. Stay tuned for our next episode, where you can bet it'll be another amazing human sharing their personal story with the world. Make sure you check out the show notes, where you will find contact information, website details, and all social media for our guest. If you're interested in being a guest on the podcast, you can email joanna@lilleyconsulting.com. Be sure to check out the lilleyconsulting.com website for additional resources outside of podcasting. Now, if you're listening to the show on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe. And while you're at it, feel free to leave a review. You can also download to listen to the Success is Subjective podcast on other popular podcast apps, such as Audible, Google Podcast, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn Radio. Thanks again for listening in, and remember, there is no single path through life. Success is what you make it.